Silence. Silence can be deafening to a culture that is constantly on the move. There seems to be more and more violence and angry protest. Debates include much more talking than listening. Disagreements are settled by seeing who can yell the loudest. However, with so much shouting and violence, silence holds more power. Ignatius Martyr studied the rhetoric of silence and said, "It is better to be silent and be real than to talk and be unreal. Teaching is good if the teacher does what he says." In history, there have been many examples of silent protest. Many protests came in the name of equality. Rosa Parks sparked the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 when she refused to give up her seat to a white man on the bus. This act of defiance landed her in jail, but her silent protest was stronger than any violent speech she could have given. This was the first of many nonviolent, silent protests in the civil rights movement. Later, in the 1968 Olympic Games, two athletes, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, participated in a famous silent protest. After the 200-meter dash, in which Tommy Smith won gold and John Carlos won bronze, they both stepped onto the podium. Without using words, these men showed their displeasure for the racism in the United States. Smith, wearing a black glove and a black scarf, simply bowed his head and raised his hand. Carlos did the same, but wore beads around his neck. Both wore black socks without shoes to represent black poverty. These protests did not include violence at all. The power in silence drove the point across. Rosa Parks and the bus boycotts led to equality, and Smith and Carlos brought racial issues to the forefront without ever saying a word. However, the power of silence goes beyond just protest. Sometimes silence in breaking news can show the raw emotion in the difficult news. Reggie White was a defensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles in 1992. He was scheduled to speak at Veterans Stadium as a part of a Billy Graham event. Earlier that day, he found out about the death of his good friend and teammate, Jerome Brown.
Tonight I had planned on sharing my testimony, but it's kind of been altered. Today, I lost a great friend. Philadelphia lost a great player. Jerome Brown died today. You know, this man was a very special man to me.
Here, one can see how difficult it is for Reggie to find the words to say after making his announcement. The silence is powerful because even though Reggie already knew what happened, he still was so shocked about the tragedy that he could not speak. And even if he did speak right away, his words would not be as powerful as the silence. Another rhetoric of silence is the moment of silence. Many times after a tragedy, a concert or sporting event will stop everything for a moment of silence. This is usually held before the event. In this time, people are asked to remember those who have died or a person who is struggling. In this time, a stadium is full of thousands of people and no one is making a sound. This is a very powerful sign of respect. This picture shows a game between the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox, two teams that are bitter rivals on the field. However, in these few minutes, they both show respect. At Yankee Stadium, the teams had a moment of silence to remember the victims of the Boston Marathon bombings. Here is another moment of silence. This is at the White House. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and the First and Second Ladies participated in a moment of silence on the 12-year anniversary of the terrorist attacks on September 11th. Cheryl Glenn, a professor at Penn State University and author of the book Unspoken, A Rhetoric of Silence, states that silence, not the spoken word, is the only phenomenon that is always at our disposal. Silence permeates our every moment, its identity a stretch of time perforated by sound. This silence remains inescapably one form of speech and an element in every dialogue. So, not only is silence important in a large context, it is still in our lives every day. The rhetoric of silence is important in studying rhetoric. Most people would theorize that rhetoric is about what is said. However,
there is more importance in what is not said. Whether purposely or not, silence can be more powerful than any word said.